You see, the moment a man realizes he's lost your interest is a defining moment not just for your relationship, but for his character. Some men take it as a challenge. They shift gears, try to win you back, pull out all the stops. They think grand gestures, poetic apologies, or sudden attention will turn things around. But let me tell you something. If it takes losing your interest for him to show effort, then was it ever real in the first place? Other men, they retreat, they pull back, not because they respect your space, but because their ego has taken a hit. They weren't here for love, they were here for validation. And when that's gone, so are they. Then there's the rare kind, the man who values, who listens, who understands that interest is not something to be forced. He doesn't guilt trip, doesn't beg, doesn't manipulate. He asks, he reflects, he grows. Because a real man doesn't just want attention, he wants connection. And if he's lost that, he either accepts it with grace or learns how to do better. So the question isn't how he reacts, it's what his reaction reveals. A man's response to your lost interest is not about you, it's about him. And that truth, that's your answer. A man's initial reaction when he realizes you've lost interest is the purest reflection of his emotional intelligence. It is in this moment, stripped of preparation, that his instincts take over. He doesn't have time to craft a response, to rehearse a speech, or to think through a calculated move. He reacts. And that reaction tells you everything. A man with high emotional intelligence will recognize the shift, sense the change in energy, and take a step back to understand it. He won't panic. He won't immediately jump into defense mode or start demanding answers. Instead, he will assess the situation with maturity. He will ask himself, what has led to this change? Whether it was something he did, or if it's simply a natural evolution of feelings. He knows that interest cannot be forced, and he respects emotions for what they are, fluid, unpredictable, and deeply personal. His response will be measured, composed, and grounded in self-awareness rather than impulsive reaction. On the other hand, a man with low emotional intelligence will often respond with ego rather than understanding. He may feel threatened, confused, or even angry. He might immediately assume it's about another man, jump to accusations, or try to make you feel guilty for pulling away. His mind races to regain control, not to understand your feelings. He may start love bombing, overcompensating with excessive attention, dramatic gestures, or empty promises. But deep down, his reaction isn't about valuing you, it's about soothing his own insecurity. He may try to manipulate the situation, gaslight you into believing that you're being unreasonable, or attempt to regain power by withdrawing abruptly and acting as if he no longer cares. Then there's the silent reaction, the one that comes from a man who is emotionally detached or emotionally unavailable. He may not react at all, he may shrug it off, act indifferent, or simply disappear without acknowledging the shift. This doesn't necessarily mean he doesn't care, it just means he lacks the emotional depth or communication skills to process it. Ultimately, a man's first reaction in this moment is raw and unfiltered. It reveals whether he operates from a place of emotional maturity or emotional impulse. It shows whether he truly sees you as a person with feelings or as an object of validation. And that reaction, that's the truth you need to see. Confidence or insecurity, these two forces dictate how a man reacts when he realizes you've lost interest. In that moment, when he senses the shift in energy, when your responses become shorter, your enthusiasm fades, and your presence feels distant, his reaction isn't just about you. It's about him. It's about what's rooted deep inside, the foundation of who he is. And whether he moves from a place of confidence or insecurity will determine everything that follows. A confident man will notice the change, but he won't crumble under it. He understands that interest, attraction, and emotions evolve. He doesn't take it as a personal attack or an assault on his worth. Instead, he takes a step back to evaluate, to process, to reflect. He may ask you directly, "Hey, I feel like something's changed. Do we need to talk?" He values communication over assumption. He doesn't immediately try to prove his worth because he already knows it. If your interest is gone, he respects that. He won't beg, he won't chase, and he won't try to manipulate his way back into your life. A confident man knows that if something is meant to be, it will be. And if it's not, he lets go with grace, not resentment. But an insecure man, he reacts from a place of fear, not understanding. He feels the shift, and instead of processing it, he panics. He may become needy, suddenly overcompensating with excessive attention, flooding you with messages, and asking what he did wrong. He may try to guilt trip you, making you feel responsible for his emotions. He might even resort to manipulation, playing mind games, acting distant to make you chase him instead. His reaction isn't about understanding your feelings, it's about preserving his own sense of control. Some insecure men respond with defensiveness. Instead of expressing vulnerability, they lash out. They turn cold, dismissive, even cruel. They might downplay what you had, mock your emotions, or act like they never cared in the first place. But that's not strength, that's fear. That's a fragile ego trying to protect itself from rejection. At the end of the day, confidence doesn't beg, and insecurity doesn't listen. The way a man reacts when he realizes he's losing you isn't about you at all, it's about him. And his response? It speaks volumes. When a man realizes you've lost interest, his reaction falls into one of two categories. He either chases harder or he withdraws completely. These two responses may seem like opposite ends of the spectrum, but both reveal more about his character, his mindset, and his emotional intelligence than any words ever could. The man who chases harder isn't necessarily doing so because he loves you. Often it's because his ego has been challenged. The moment he senses your distance, he feels a loss of control, and that feeling is something he cannot tolerate. So he starts to overcompensate. He bombards you with texts, suddenly becomes more affectionate, makes grand promises, and does everything he can to pull you back in. But here's the key: where was this effort before? If it takes losing you to make him act right, then he was never truly valuing you in the first place. He was comfortable, complacent, and only when he feels your absence does he realize what he took for granted. But is he fighting for you, or is he fighting for his pride? Then there's the man who withdraws, the one who senses your fading interest and instead of chasing, pulls back. This can mean different things. Some men withdraw because they are emotionally mature enough to respect your feelings. They understand that attraction and emotions are not obligations, and they have enough self-worth to step away without resentment. They might ask for clarity, but they won't beg, manipulate, or guilt trip you into staying. This is the kind of withdrawal that comes from self-respect, not weakness. But then there's the other kind of withdrawal, the one that comes from a bruised ego. This man doesn't process the shift with maturity. Instead, he acts like he never cared in the first place. He suddenly becomes cold, dismissive, indifferent. He might even lash out, making hurtful remarks or pretending you were never important to him. His pride won't let him admit that he feels rejected, so he builds a wall instead. Whether a man chases or withdraws, his reaction is a window into his true nature. Is he chasing because he values you or because he hates losing? Is he withdrawing because he respects you or because he's too fragile to face the reality of change? Pay attention, because his response speaks louder than words ever could. When a man realizes you've lost interest, his response will tell you exactly who he is. A wrong man will manipulate, a right man will value and respect. There's no in between. In that moment, when he senses your energy shift, when he feels the absence of your enthusiasm, his reaction isn't just about trying to win you back, it's about control, self-worth, and the way he sees relationships. The wrong man doesn't handle rejection with grace. He sees it as a threat, an attack on his ego, something he must fix. Not by understanding your feelings, but by bending them to his will. He will use guilt, pressure, or even emotional games to make you question yourself. He might say, after everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me? Or, you'll never find someone who loves you like I do. Suddenly, the focus shifts away from your feelings and onto his. He makes it seem like you're being unfair, like you owe him something just because he was there. He might even pull away strategically, hoping his absence will make you second-guess yourself and come running back. But that's not love. That's manipulation. Then there's the right man. The man who, when faced with your loss of interest, does not fight to control, but instead seeks to understand. He values you, and because of that, he respects your emotions, even when they don't serve his desires. He doesn't try to guilt trip you into staying. He doesn't make it about his pride. Instead, he listens. He asks questions, but not to change your mind, rather to gain clarity. Notice something feels different. Do you want to talk about it? That's the response of a man who genuinely cares, even if the answer isn't what he wants to hear. The difference is simple. The wrong man sees your fading interest as a problem to be solved, a challenge to be won, or a blow to his pride. The right man sees it as a reality to be respected, even if it hurts. One seeks control, the other seeks understanding. One values power, the other values you. So when a man reacts to your distance, don't just listen to his words, watch his actions. Because a man who truly values you will never have to manipulate you into staying. When a man realizes you've lost interest, his emotional maturity is what determines whether he accepts your choice with grace or resents it with bitterness. This moment is not just about his feelings for you. It's about his ability to handle disappointment, rejection, and change. A mature man understands that no one owes him love, attention, or affection. He recognizes that feelings evolve and sometimes they fade. His reaction to this truth will show you exactly who he is at his core. An emotionally mature man does not take your loss of interest as an attack. He does not see it as a failure or a challenge to his worth. Instead, he accepts it as part of life. He might ask questions, seek understanding, or express his emotions, but he does so with respect. He does not try to guilt trip you into staying. He does not lash out with anger or coldness. He may feel hurt, but he knows that love, true love, is not about possession or control. If you are no longer emotionally invested, he values you enough to respect that and let go with dignity. He may say something like, "I appreciate you being honest, I care about you, but I respect your feelings." That is the response of a man who understands that love cannot be forced. On the other hand, an emotionally immature man will struggle to accept reality. He will see your loss of interest as rejection, and instead of processing his emotions in a healthy way, he will let resentment take over. He may react with anger, saying things meant to hurt you, such as, "You were never that special anyway," or "You'll regret this when I move on." He might withdraw completely, ignoring you as a form of punishment, or worse, he might try to manipulate the situation, guilt-tripping you, making you question yourself, or trying to make you jealous to regain control. His ego cannot handle the idea that someone is choosing to walk away from him, so he reacts with bitterness rather than understanding. At the end of the day, emotional maturity is what separates a man who respects your choice from one who resents it. One lets go with grace, the other clings with resentment. One values connection, the other values control. And when that moment comes, his response will tell you everything you need to know. When a man realizes you've lost interest, his words might try to tell one story, but his actions will always reveal the truth. Words are easy. They can be rehearsed, manipulated, and used to persuade. But actions, they come from instinct, from habit, from the deepest parts of who he truly is. How he moves, what he does next, how he treats you after the shift. These things will tell you far more than anything he said. A man who genuinely values you will show it in how he handles the situation. He won't just talk about respect, he will demonstrate it. He won't just say he understands, he will prove it by not trying to manipulate your emotions. If he is hurt, he will express it in a way that is honest, not destructive. If he wants clarity, he will seek it with patience, not desperation. If he truly cares about you beyond his own ego, he will accept your choice rather than trying to force a different outcome. He will carry himself with dignity, even in disappointment. That is a man whose actions align with his words. But then, there's the other kind of man, the one whose words and actions don't match. He may say, "I respect your decision," but the next thing you know, he's spreading rumors, throwing passive-aggressive comments, or acting cold and distant as a way to punish you. He may say, "I just want you to be happy," but then tries to guilt-trip you, question your choices, or make you feel like you're making a mistake. He might claim to accept the situation, but if he starts playing games, ignoring you to make you jealous, suddenly flaunting his interest in someone else, or acting as if you never mattered, that is his true nature speaking. The reality is, when emotions run high, people can say all the right things. They can put on an act, tell you what you want to hear, and promise they're fine, but their actions will always expose what's real. Does he handle it with grace, or does he unravel when he realizes he's losing control? Does he honor your feelings, or does he try to manipulate them? Words are temporary, but actions are permanent. Watch what he does, not what he says, and you'll have your answer.